keep a watchful eye out for our Republic, my friends. And in return, she will watch over you.
Welcome, I'm Droniak, and this is my review of Republique Remastered on PC. But before I get into it, I want to quickly make two disclaimers. First, this game is an episodic game, and the current release on Steam comes with 3 episodes out of a total of 5, so there are 2 more episodes coming. Secondly, this is a crowdfunded project that I backed during its crowdfunding stage. With that out of the way, let's get on to the actual review. Republique is a point-and-click adventure game with stealth elements. Think of a mixture between Telltale's The Walking Dead and old-school Metal Gear Solid 1 or Splinter Cell 1 stealth action gameplay. The combination may sound weird, but it works really well. The concept behind this is that you are a hacker who has somehow managed to infiltrate the systems of a secret republic. In doing so, you've come across a young girl called Hope, who's being held captive in an underground facility. As you may imagine, the goal of the game is to guide Hope to safety and freedom. You do this by following Hope around on her phone and taking over cameras along the way. This lets you shift perspective so you can get a better overview of the situation. You can even move along cameras far ahead of Hope to scout out the situation and spot where guards are, so it becomes much easier to sneak Hope past their patrols. This moving along cameras all happens inside a separate game view called OmniView. You open this by pressing spacebar and it completely distorts your vision of the game world, and you'll gain the ability to hack into systems, which initially will give you stuff like voicemails and emails on computers that will provide you with some lore and background for the world. But eventually you also gain abilities like X-ray vision, which allows you to spot guards through walls, or the ability to expend some battery energy to make electronics malfunction to distract guards, or even cause static on their radios so they're temporarily stationary. This allows you to more easily sneak Hope past their patrols and provides multiple options in every gameplay situation. Meanwhile, in regular game view, you're guiding Hope around, telling her where to go and which objects or even people to interact with, and eventually she too will gain a few items that she can use. These are primarily used to interact with guards in the environment. Initially, Hope can only pickpocket from them, but eventually she'll be able to gain items like pepper spray, which can temporarily disable a guard. But you better get her into hiding quick, because afterwards the guard will recover and alert level will go up and they'll try to find her more aggressively, at least for a little while. Later on, tasers and sleep mines are even more effective. They'll be able to permanently get rid of a guard in a specific area. This strange combination of stealth action with point-and-click adventure gameplay works very well. It's a lot of fun to guide Hope around the environment and try to sneak past patrols. Be that the easy way by malfunctioning electronics to distract guards, or the hard way by actually memorizing their patrols and precisely timing Hope's movements. Moreover, the guards get a bit more difficult later on through the episodes. They start to gain face masks that are impervious to pepper spray, or full body armor that makes it impossible to tase them. Individually, these are all fairly simple mechanics, but combine them and you get quite a bit of depth to this game's gameplay, even though, on the whole, the entire experience is extremely easy. This is not a stealth action focused game at all. It is in fact more like Telltale's The Walking Dead, completely centered around its story. As such, it's easy to see why the developers chose to make things relatively simple so everyone can get through the entire narrative. However, in episode 3 you can start to see some hints of them ramping up the difficulty a little bit, most likely due to community requests, because episode 1 and 2 are way too easy. That doesn't go for the puzzles in this game, however, because those remain easy throughout. In fact, I'd say the puzzles in episode 3 are much easier than those in episode 1 and 2. And even those are so simple anyone could realistically complete them with ease in a matter of minutes. That's not to say they're outright awful, because actually I really rather like two specific puzzles, one in episode 1 and one in episode 2. These are extremely well designed to truly fit the theme and setting of where they are located in the world, and clearly a lot of thought has gone into them and they've been very well designed. Even so, much as I can appreciate their design, they are still so easy. I had them finished in a matter of like 5 minutes, if you don't count listening to all the lore and dialogue that's being thrown out during these puzzles. But much as I like those two specific room-sized puzzles, most of the puzzles in this game are a fair bit more mediocre, and on top of that even easier. And one puzzle in both episode 2 and 3 I would probably classify as the most annoying puzzle I've ever experienced. It's this sort of puzzle where you have to rotate a bunch of components in a 3D environment to try to form a whole, but the endpoint is rarely clear and not locked, so it's extremely easy to overshoot and then have to completely start all over again because you have to get exactly the right angle and direction, and it's annoying. Suffice it to say that if you're looking for an adventure game with a lot of good puzzles, this isn't it. You better look elsewhere. I've talked a few times about the differences between the episodes, and as in any episodic game, the quality of the episodes isn't exactly equal. I really liked episode 1. It was a good introduction to the story, and a great puzzle midway through, and its constant forward momentum throughout its level design. Even the backtrack bits were almost entirely through new areas. Meanwhile, it was a bit linear. There was not much room to maneuver. Almost every guard situation could only really be solved in one way, without using abilities. Moreover, it was far too easy, even as an introductory episode, and the area design is clearly not on a level of the later episodes. Even so, I would say episode 2 was a weaker one in all. It had a huge open area that allowed you plenty of ways to maneuver around guards in whatever way you saw fit, and the area design was much better than in episode 1, with some really great things to look at. However, it was also backtrack central. You were constantly going back and forth in the same area almost the entire episode, and it had no forward momentum at all because of that. It felt boring about midway through, and I was glad when the episode ended. Lastly, episode 3 was in my mind the best episode thus far. It was far more challenging than the previous episodes, with way more mechanics to utilize. It had better storytelling throughout, and it had awesome area design, with some great areas like the early media center area that allowed you to hide behind desks, inside cubicles, behind little garbage canisters or printers. It felt really like everything in that area belonged. It also really leverages all the qualities of this engine and visual style to provide some really cool things to look at and some amazing lighting effects. However, even this episode has its sour notes. The complete lack of any significant puzzles was a real downer, especially after the fantastic room-sized puzzles in episode 1 and 2. Likewise, there were two areas about midway through the episode 3 that didn't feel like they belonged at all. There were these huge cavernous areas with loads of walls everywhere that seemed to serve no purpose whatsoever other than to make it easier to sneak through. And who would really spend their budget for huge cavernous areas that serve no purpose whatsoever instead of using it for, say, more living space? Had these areas been stripped down to about a third their size, nothing of value would have been lost. But I am really nitpicking here. The third episode was awesome, particularly its ending, and episode 1 was quite good. Even episode 2 was enjoyable enough to play through. As such, I am hopeful for the quality of the remaining 2 episodes that should come out later this year. but there's also some room to be concerned because episode 3 ends in a way that ensures episode 4 needs to change something quite significantly. Either there's going to be a huge change to the way the story is told, or there's going to be an enormous change to the gameplay mechanics. There doesn't seem to be any way to avoid this. And as such, the chance that there might be something that goes wrong with the next 2 episodes is a fair deal higher than it was for the first 3 episodes. Thus far, I haven't even really talked about the game's core components yet. The thing that keeps you hooked to the monitor throughout the entire episode, and that keeps you coming back for more, and that currently has me eagerly awaiting episode 4 to see what happens, and that is of course its story. Much like Telltale's The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, Republique is a game that revolves entirely around its story. Initially it starts very disjointed. All you really know is that Hope is this little girl trapped in an underground facility in some mysterious secret republic, and they're probably about to brainwash her or something, so you really need to get her out of there. But as you progress through the episodes, you start to learn about this world that she's been living in. This dystopian republic that has cameras around every corner, guards in every hallway, books that have been banned by the Republic's leader because they felt that they were a bad influence, newspapers sprouting nothing but propaganda, and all the while everyone's talking about this mysterious upcoming event called the Arrival that's supposed to change everything, not just within the Republic, but for the world outside as well. It is this deep and complex, interesting world, in addition to the tale of Hope's escape, that constantly kept me closer to my screen wanting to know what happens next. And I still do, even though episode 4 is months away from release. This all in spite of Republique being an entirely linear storytelling experience. This isn't like Telltale's games where you have constant impactful choices to make. Instead, there are no choices whatsoever to make. The story is set, you're just experiencing it as it happens. That was a bit of a letdown, particularly in episode 2, where you do have a moment where it seems like you're going to make a choice that is going to really impact what happens in the entire rest of the game, to the extent that it seemed like it would split the narrative in 2. Instead, the only payoff was a single line of dialogue. That's probably part of what also makes me not like episode 2 as much as the other 2. Even so, I do like the mechanics that Camouflage have chosen to tell Republique's story with. Contrary to a Telltale game, this is not non-stop narrative and cutscenes and dialogue. Instead, each episode has an opening and ending cutscene, and in between there are barely any cutscenes. And even if something important happens, you usually have control over cameras, you can still gather intel, you can scan individuals to see who they are, and some more detailed info on their background. And the scanning of items in the game world is actually an important part of the game's method for storytelling. Specifically, the normal gameplay only provides you with the core story experience. There is no needless exposition, there is no extra world building there. That is all hidden in collectibles that you can find in the environment, which is a nice way of allowing players to choose how they want to experience the game. If you want to delve deep, you can, but it's not forced on you. All you need to do is collect the collectibles, and this does have a meaningful impact. For example, by the end of episode 3, if you've collected the relevant collectibles, you'll have a pretty good idea of some of the stuff that's gonna happen with this Arrival that everyone's talking about. Whereas if you've just followed the core story path, you're still gonna be clueless, and you'll just have to wait and see what happens. As you've probably already realized by now, I really dig the story in this game, and I feel it's the core component that really drives the experience home. Now, if you know about this game's origins as a Kickstarter for an iOS game, indeed, the iOS version of episode 1 was already released more than a year ago, it may sound a bit strange that the story is the focus of it, and that the episodes individually are about 3 hours in length, on average. That's hardly standard in the mobile gaming scene. Indeed, this Republique Remastered Edition doesn't look or feel or play anything like a mobile game. It's seems like a proper PC game right from the start. And even in terms of visuals, it can compete with some of the most visually impressive indie games out there. Of course, primarily due to the use of the new Unity 5 engine and its physically based shading technique. I'm sure you've already noticed the amazing lighting effects, reflections and beautiful dark deep shadows that are on display in this game. Those are truly the highlight of its visual experience. The rest, including motion capture, detail of models, lip syncing and texture work, is all of high quality, but not particularly exceptional. But even being able to say that about a game that started off on mobile devices is something truly exceptional. Clearly the year they took to develop this PC version was well spent. Indeed, this is also reflected in the game's options menu. It has support for virtually every resolution you can think of. It even detected my NVIDIA Dynamic Super Resolution settings, so it defaulted me to 4K resolution when I first started the game. Likewise, it lets you set up 6 different visual effects from low to high, and its frame rate limit can be set as high as 120 FPS, which is better than most AAA titles these days. That being said, there is one major visual shortcoming in this game, and that is a complete lack of anti-aliasing options. I'm sure you've already noticed the jaggies in this video, particularly during the cutscenes. It's a real shame that we can't actually turn anti-aliasing on. Now when it comes to the sound options, it's similarly a mixed bag. It does have 2 sliders, which is better than most iOS ports, but it doesn't have a separate dialogue volume slider. This isn't actually the big problem that you might at first glance think it to be, because contrary to almost every game I've ever played, the sound balance in this game is absolutely amazing. At no point could I not hear the dialogue over the sound effects. The volume balance is on point the entire way through. What I do find disappointing about the game's audio is that there's a heavy use of text-to-speech. Now that's because there's a character who only communicates using text-to-speech, and there are valid reasons given for it during the game's story, but it's still very jarring when everyone else is so beautifully well voice casted. As for controls, they are simple default was the PC controls, and mostly mouse clicks. There's not a lot to them, but it is sad that we can't rebind any of these controls. I usually prefer ESDF, and there's no way to actually use that to control the cameras in the game. But it's a minor complaint since the controls are so simple to begin with. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with these first 3 episodes of Republique Remastered on PC. It's just a shame that they couldn't release the entire game in one go. Now I have to wait a full year probably for the remaining 2 episodes to come out and for the conclusion to this story. With that, I think it's time to move on to my recommendations for this game. I'm not gonna give it a review score. Instead, I'm gonna tell you who I would recommend this game for and who I would recommend to avoid this game. That, combined with the rest of this review, should easily allow you to make up your mind as to whether it's worth purchasing for you. Now, Republique Remastered is absolutely the game for gamers looking for a narrative-driven adventure. It's fantastic if you've loved Telltale's The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. Similarly, if you enjoyed classic stealth mechanics in Metal Gear Solid or Splinter Cell way back when those were released, this will probably be your cup of tea as well, as long as you like a good story. And lastly, if you enjoy storytelling and world building in games, for example that of CRPGs like Dragon Age or The Witcher, you'll probably enjoy this game as well. The people who will not like this game are pretty much the opposites of the aforementioned. If you dislike storytelling and world building in games, this is absolutely not for you. And if you've never enjoyed stealth mechanics in gaming, this is certainly not a game you want to try. One final thing to really keep in mind before you decide to purchase this game is that it is currently incomplete. Yes, it was released as a full remastered edition on PC, but it still only includes the first 3 episodes. The remaining episodes are still in production, and most likely episode 4 won't be out for quite a few months yet, and episode 5 probably not before the end of the year. It's your choice whether you want to gamble on whether those are going to be good or not. Personally, I'm happy with my purchase, and coming in at about 3 hours on average per episode of narrative-driven adventure game gameplay, and even more if you go for 100% collectible completion rate, this is, in my opinion, well worth the price of admission, especially since it only comes in at 23 euros at full price. Alternatively, you can of course just wait for a Steam sale. That's it for this review. I hope you found it helpful, and please do like, favorite and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.